Hi Sadie, it's Gemma. I'm going to be reading an excerpt from my new novel, Six Rooms, which is due out from Cemetery Gates Media this year. And it deals with a very old and very peculiar and quite possibly haunted house called the Sunshine Chateau. This excerpt deals with one of the six rooms mentioned in the title, and I hope you enjoy it. The blue room was artfully positioned so that any visitor to Sunshire had no choice but to notice it almost as soon as they left the reception hall. Situated to the left of a long cloister that ran directly from the space between the giant staircases in the hall to the very guts of the house itself, the door to the blue room was the first door open to the tour party as they meandered along, half listening to the tour guide's polished patter. Patter that was almost drowned out by a chorus of gasps and murmurs as a bright glow of cerulean blue light made itself known to the group. The resulting whispers as they crowded around the open mouth of the room filled the cloister from floor to ceiling. The guide was used to this reaction and stepped back to allow the tourists to poke their head in through the door and gawp. Their admiration was a balm to him, and he bathed in it. Because despite everything, he remained proud of the Sunshine Chateau, even though he hated it to his very core. And while it was true that most of the rooms in the chateau had been built for the express purpose of impressing those who gazed upon them rather than with any practical living requirements in mind, such as comfort, space, light and warmth, the blue room in particular was possessed of a degree of ostentatious glamour and glitz that brooked no refusal when it came to stopping and admiring it, and as such it always featured as the first room on the tour. Or had, at least, until Ned came to work at the chateau. The tour guide curled his lip as he thought about Ned. Ned would be working in the blue room, his tools and equipment spread out messily. He would not enjoy being interrupted. Nevertheless, the tour guide very deliberately allowed the party to crowd into the doorway of the room, knowing how much this would irritate Ned. The thought of the other man's hunched shoulders and put-upon nervous cough was enough to bring a small smile to the guide's face, because the tour guide was an openly vindictive sort of man who liked causing havoc, no matter how small in scale that havoc was. In that respect, he and the Sunshine Chateau were well suited to each other. Who is that man? Ned jumped and groaned inwardly as a thick Baltimore accent broke his concentration, hissing the question at what the speaker imagined was a discreet volume. It wasn't. The harsh whisper hung in the air like an unwanted fly hovering around a fruit bowl. Another damned tour party, he thought, his brows beetling in annoyance. He hunched his shoulders, refusing to turn around and engage. For one thing, he knew the tour guide would be with them, and the tour guide gave Ned the creeps like no one else. He couldn't say why exactly. The dapper, smooth-talking older man had been nothing but courteous to Ned ever since he'd started working at the Sunshire. But there was something in the set of his smile that Ned distrusted, a smile that appeared and disappeared too abruptly, as if only summoned for a purpose, rather than being a true expression of enjoyment or camaraderie. Ned himself was a natural smiler, or at least he had been until the last few years of his life, which had dealt him a few blows that made smiling a little more difficult than it used to be. Still, Ned was unfailingly warm and polite to anyone and everyone he encountered, with one notable exception, when he was balls deep in cleaning and restoring a 544-page first edition of Great Expectations, a task that required an intense level of focus that he simply couldn't maintain if he was being interrupted every 5 fucking minutes by yet another noisy, nosy tour group doing the Sunshire Special, as he liked to call it. So, on this occasion, Ned refused to acknowledge his new audience, keeping his back turned. He knew this was rude, but he had run out of patience, and for Ned, that was quite an achievement. He carried on with his work, gently massaging some leather cream into the cover of the tome, moisturising the dry binding in its weakest spots, and admiring the rich burnished reds and greens of the polished calf leather that seemed to wake under his ministrations. He almost forgot about the tourists, but sadly, out of sight did not equate to out of mind. The hairs on the back of his neck bristled, as they do when a person knows they are being watched. He held back an involuntary shudder. The sensation of being watched was something he was getting far too well acquainted with at Sunshire, and he hated it. He hated having his back to the room, to the door, to the tour group. It made him feel vulnerable, exposed, defenceless. But it was better than sitting the other way around. Something he had learned from bitter experience not to do. Because facing the other way around meant facing the Blue Room's ghost. And Ned could not handle that. Not today. Not after last time.